You want the best i5-12400 gaming PC build, but you're not sure about the memory, motherboard, and cooler. Don't worry, you've come to the right place. Hi, welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. The i5-12400 and 12400F are the first $200 budget gaming CPU in years. Yes, years! And it comes with a time when GPU prices are going down, finally. Today we're going to give you everything that you need to know to make the best i5-12400 gaming PC build in 2022. We'll cover the best motherboard for i5-12400, the best memory for i5-12400, including testing several different kits with different GPUs, the best cooler for i5-12400, and we'll do a price comparison against the now $225 Ryzen 5600X. Remember, if you get value of the video, please give it a like as it really helps out the channel. And of course, subscribe and click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. With that, let's jump into it. The i5-12400 and 12400F are Intel's 12th gen, 6-core, 12-thread budget CPUs with MSRPs of $200 for the i5-12400 and $180 for the i5-12400F. Now, unlike the more powerful i5-12600K, the 12400F only has performance cores and no efficiency cores. It also is a locked part, meaning it can't be overclocked, so it's best to pair it with a B660 or H670 motherboard. Unlike the 12600K, the i5-1200 is designed to run at a 65-watt TDP spec, though those power limits can be lifted on most motherboards, and that's how you should run it. More on that when we discuss the best motherboards for i5-12400. So should you get the i5-12400 or i5-12400F? Now the only difference is that the F CPU does not have integrated graphics. Note that the integrated GPU on the 12400, it's really only strong enough for regular office type work, not for gaming. So if you want to build a PC without a GPU to wait out the GPU market, then the Ryzen 5600G or 5700G are really the only choices, not the i5-12400. But if you do any kind of video rendering work like video editing, then Intel's QuickSync technology will allow the iGPU and your dedicated GPU to work together to reduce rendering times, and I'd recommend the i5-12400 if that's the case. For gamers just looking to game with a dedicated GPU, the i5-12400F is definitely your choice if it's cheaper. If they're about the same in price, then I would tend to grab the i5-12400. But what about performance? The i5-12400 performance is quite impressive, and it's a huge jump up from the 11th gen i5-12400. In productivity workloads, it trades blows with the Ryzen 5600X, where it actually wins more than it loses, particularly when it comes to rendering tasks. Although, if you are looking for a productivity CPU, the i5-12600K, i7-12700, or Ryzen 5800X make a lot more sense. But you're here for gaming, and there's great news. In TechSpot's testing of 10 games at 1080p with an RX 6900 XT, the i5-12400 trails the Ryzen 5600X by just 5%. Of course, nobody should be pairing an RX 6900 XT with the i5-12400, so expect a more reasonable GPU like the RTX 3060 Ti or RX 6600 XT. The gaming performance will be identical. For memory, does it make sense to just buy a budget kit of 2x8GB 3200 CL16 for around $50, or spend about $30 more for a 3600 CL16 kit? To find out, I tested two different memory kits, an ultra budget silicon power kit of 2x8GB DDR4 3200 CL16 that I got for just $50, and a more premium kit of 2x8GB DDR4 3600 CL16 memory from Kingston Fury's Renegade lineup, which Kingston sent over to us, so a big thank you to Kingston. We tested 3 games at 1080p and 1440p resolutions. And as I've done in the past, we're not using ultra presets, but instead we're using the second highest preset, which, if anything, will increase the load on the CPU and should highlight any memory speed differences. Note that ray tracing, resizable bar, and DLSS are all disabled for this testing, which was conducted on the Asus TUF B660M Plus motherboard. Now, to make things really interesting, rather than just test with an ultra high-end GPU like the RTX 3080 12GB model we used, I also threw in testing for the RTX 3060, which I feel is a much more reasonable GPU for an i5-12400 build. Starting off with Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 1080p, which is only tested with the RTX 3060. This is usually a CPU demanding title, but as we can see using the 2x8GB 3200 CL16 memory, we get 124 average FPS and 102 FPS for the 1% low. Switching to the 3600 CL16 kit shows virtually no improvement, other than a 3% improvement to the 1% low score. At 1440p, we are now entirely GPU bound, and both memory kits perform identically. Next up is Watch Dogs Legion at 1080p, tested with both GPUs. Using the RTX 3060, we see no benefit to using the faster memory, as the average FPS is identical and the 1 FPS difference in the 1% lows is easily within our margin of error. However, when we switch over to the RTX 3080 12GB, we do see a very slight improvement going from DDR4 3200 CL16 to a 3600 CL16 kit. Our average FPS improves by just over 4%, while the 1% lows improve by 7%. So this is somewhat similar to what we saw with Ryzen 5000 in gaming, where once we approach the bleeding edge of GPUs, we can see a very small difference in performance at 1080p. At 1440p, we see a very slight improvement with the RTX 3060 of 3% when switching the faster memory, with no change in the 1% lows. This could of course be down to margin of error. With the RTX 3080 12GB, there's virtually no difference between the memory kits, as the 1 FPS difference is well within our margin of error. Next up is Assassin's Creed Valhalla at 1080p. And here we just don't see any appreciable FPS increase going to faster memory, either with the RTX 3060 or with the much faster RTX 3080 12GB. Any small changes are most likely margin of error. Finally, at 1440p, it's essentially the same here. It'd be hard to separate any actual gains from the margin of error with either GPU. Looking at the average data at 1080p, and the only difference we see is using the RTX 3080 12GB, and it's only about 3 to 4% for the average FPS and 1% lows. At 1440p, we are entirely GPU bound, and we see virtually identical performance between 3200 CL16 and 3600 CL16 memory. So overall, we see virtually the same performance between the kits, even with the RTX 3080 12GB, which honestly I would not pair with an i5 12400 build in the first place. It is possible that with even faster memory, say DDR4 4000, we might see another little bump with the RTX 3080 12GB, but that's a pretty imbalanced combo, and you'd be better off switching to the Ryzen 5600X, i5 12600K, or the recently price-reduced i7 12700 instead. Given the current price difference of $30 between the 3200 CL16 and 3600 CL16 memory for a 2x8GB kit, I'd go 3200 CL16 all the way, and upgrading the memory speed would not be high on my priority list. We'll go over upgrade priorities later in the video. Remember to check your local price to see what makes sense for you. Let's talk about the best GPU for the i5 12400. Now, at the time of filming this, GPU prices in many regions have dropped significantly for GPUs across the scalper market, the used GPU market, and the retail market. Here in the US, every GPU, including the RTX 3000 series, are now able to be purchased directly from a retailer, though the best prices for the RTX 3000 GPUs do require buying a combo deal. If you're looking to play at 1080p, the best deal right now is the Radeon RX 6600 and RX 6600 XT, hands down. Though I'm hopeful that the RTX 3050 and 3060 will come down more rapidly in price. But right now, at the budget mid-range level, it's all about the RX 6600 and 6600 XT, as they just smoke the competition in price to performance. If you're looking to play in 1440p, things right now are a little more complicated. The RX 6600 XT, it's a capable budget 1440p gaming GPU for a lot of games, but not all titles. The RTX 3060 Ti, 3070, Radeon RX 6700 XT, or 6800 would be a solid choice for 1440p gaming, but the pricing on those GPUs is still quite high, though I'm hopeful we'll see at least the Radeon GPUs fall quite quickly. What about 4K gaming? Well, unless you get a great deal on an RTX 3080 or RX 6900 XT, maybe used as GPU mining comes to an end around the middle part of 2022, then I would tend to pair those much faster GPUs with at least the next tier up of CPUs like the Ryzen 5800X, upcoming Ryzen 5800X 3D, the i5 12600K, or the i7 12700. So what's the best motherboard for i5 12400? As always, Intel makes this complicated. Thanks a lot, Intel. The first thing to know is that we prefer to run the CPU without the default Intel power limits, which restrict it to a 65-watt TDP. The performance is mostly noticed in multi-threaded workloads, while the jump in gaming is very slight. So for gaming only builds, this isn't our top priority, but we do want to get it. What we really want to ensure is that we get the features we're looking for. For gamers, a decent amount of USB rear connectivity and solid VRMs that won't throttle our CPU during gaming are a must. If we're going to plug in an analog audio device like headphones or speakers with this kind of connector, then we'd really prefer to get a high-end audio codec like the ALC 1200 or ALC 1220, which offer better signal to noise, a boost for front panel connected headsets, and other nice audio features. At the ultra budget level, the boards I'm currently recommending are the MSI Pro B660M-A and Asus Prime B660M-A for between $140 and $150. Note that in early testing, some B660 motherboards are not properly running the i5-12400 with power limits removed, specifically the ASRock B660M Pro RS. The Gigabyte B660M DS3H for $119 is a board I had recommended, but it does require updating the latest BIOS and manually turning off the power limits in the BIOS. And even then, it's running just a little bit behind the other motherboards in gaming. Hopefully these can get fixed in a future BIOS update, but for now, stick to the Asus and MSI budget offerings. For a more premium experience, including upgraded audio, the next set of boards are all in the $170 to $190 range, which includes the Asus TUF Gaming B660M, the MSI B660 Mortar or Tomahawk, possibly the Aorus Master. I would ignore any board over $200, as now we have to wonder, why aren't we just spending that money on upgrading another component instead? Now, links for everything are going to be down in the video description. What about the best cooler for the i5-12400, which does come with an included box cooler? This cooler is probably sufficient for most users, though it can be noisy under full load and it may not give you maximum performance with the power limits removed. The cooler also does look pretty good with an LED ring light, but it's one area I'd consider upgrading, as in our build, a simple budget tower air cooler significantly reduces temperatures and ensures quiet, high-performance operation for just about $25 to $40. Just remember that the i5-12400 uses new LGA 1700 socket, so you'll need to get the proper mounting bracket for it. At the time of this video, only a couple of higher-end coolers ship with it. That being said, many air coolers sold on Amazon can be bundled for free with the bracket kit, just like the id Cooling SE224 XT Black version that we used in our testing. I'll leave a link to a couple in the video description below that come bundled with the kit. For overall case and airflow, I'd recommend any of the more budget to mid-range PC cases with good airflow, and the typical at least 2 intake fans and 1 exhaust fan. That way we have a slight positive pressure bias to reduce dust buildup. Just don't overspend on the case, otherwise, again, we've defeated the purpose of going with the more budget CPU offering. Now, at the time of this video, cases are still somewhat inflated due to the increased global shipping costs, so I'm going to leave links to a couple that I'd recommend looking at down in the video description. So what's the better buy? The i5-12400 or the Ryzen 5600X? Well, in terms of performance, they're virtually identical. The Ryzen will slightly outperform the i5-12400 if you use a super high-end graphics card, but if we use anything reasonable for these, effectively the same performance. And they're relatively easy to compare because I would recommend the same memory, the same power supply, the same graphics cards, everything except for the motherboards. So let's take a look at the platform costs. The i5-12400 right now in the US is selling for just under $200 US. Occasionally comes down cheaper than that, but right now that's what it's selling for. Hopefully it will settle back down to its MSRP. The Asus Prime B660M-A is a great motherboard. At the budget level, it will run the CPU at the full frequency with the power limits removed. Great motherboard overall. Some of the other cheaper ones are having an issue with that. Hopefully they will be fixed through BIOS updates. Now let's take a look at what a Ryzen 5 5600X build would cost. Essentially, it's $224. Yes, AMD has reduced the price of this CPU at most major retailers, somewhere between $220 to $230. You can actually grab it at Micro Center for almost $200 right now. It's about time, AMD. Thank you. And of course, we can grab a really cheap B550M DS3H motherboard with it for only $110. Now that puts the total cost of this package at $335 for the AMD side and $338 for the i5-12400. Essentially, it's a wash. They are virtually identical in their performance, so you can, at the budget level at least, build with whichever one you want to build with. On the more premium side, if we take a look at the motherboards, the lowest tier of the premium motherboards really is something like the Asus TUF Gaming B660 256 AM plus Wi-Fi for $180. This is the level of performance that we are looking for here in terms of the audio, in terms of better VRMs, just an overall better motherboard package. And if we look at the AMD side, you can go with a nice motherboard like the Gigabyte B550M Aorus Pro-P. It's got ALC 1220 audio codec. Overall, just nice micro ATX, more premium motherboard for only $140. So for the Ryzen package, we end up at $365 there, all told. And for the Intel package, we end up at $377. So essentially, it's a wash either way. So build with whatever you want to build with right now. If you want to build a 12th gen Intel system, go for it. If you want to build a Ryzen 5600X gaming system, go for it. You can't go wrong. Here's a sample build that you could put together right now that will play great games, 1080p, really kill it for $1,031. i5-12400, we went with the SE224 XT cooler. Can use the included box cooler, but this is going to get you the maximum performance out of it, and it's going to be nice and cool, nice and quiet. Asus Prime B660M, I think we've mentioned this motherboard several times, needs no introduction for $140. We simply went with the cheapest kit of 2x8 GB DDR4 3200 CL16 memory. Right now it's $58 over at Amazon Silicon Power. For storage, we simply did 500 gigabytes of M.2 budget NVMe storage. That's a Silicon Power A60 right now. There's a number of these budget drives that will kind of rotate to be the cheapest. For the graphics card, Sapphire Radeon RX 6600. This is among the cheapest of the RX 6600s. Hopefully these prices will continue to drop. Now $440, that includes the shipping from Newegg. Micro Center also has them about the same price right now. For the case, you can really just pick whatever your favorite case is. I went with the Deepcool Matrix 40 simply because it's cheap and it only does come with the one included fan in the back. So in order to remedy that, I just went ahead and picked up for $27 an up here ARGB fan pack because you want it to look cool, of course. And it comes with this nice little controller for only $27, which is really, really good deal. Bling up your build for really little cost. And then the nice thing about the 12th gen Intel is like Ryzen 5000, and unlike the 11th and 10th gen, it doesn't use a lot of power. So you can go with something like the Gold 550 watt Antec Neo Eco unit that we've got here for not that much money right now, $40. Overall, $1,000 to get you great gaming performance. The only thing that I would really do differently here is if you want more premium audio, you might want to swap in the better motherboards here for about another $40. And of course, if you want to play at 1440p, go out and try and find yourself a better graphics card. 6700 XT, the 3060 Ti would be probably where I start. Maybe the RX 6600 XT if you're really, really budget dependent and you want to play those games, because I know it's come down to about $500 at the time of filming. Remember to check out the video description for links to everything discussed in this best i5-12400 gaming PC build. Of course, remember to give the video a like. It makes a big difference to the channel. And of course, subscribe and hit that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. I also want to send a huge thank you to Zach and the firefighters at the St. John's Fire District in South Carolina for sending over this cool t-shirt. And I'll catch you on the next one.